Well, hello and welcome to A Goodman's Tale. My name is Joshua Goodman. A Goodman's Tale is a place where we can come together, a safe place where we can come together, we can talk about, we can discuss life's ups, life's downs, the difficulties, tragedies, and life's greatest victories when things just went so according to plan, and then those days when things just get turned upside down and come at you all sideways. We ask, as always, if you're enjoying these episodes, that you would like, share, and also subscribe. Let's get it. All right, guys, today we are going to be talking about a subject that is so very important to me, something that's very dear to my heart, and that is Renaissance Classical Christian Academy. 12 or so years ago, my mom and dad, they had a vision for Christian education. My dad had been a pastor, goodness sake, for probably 15, 20 years at that time, and I came to this realization that we did not just simply want to be a church that met on Sunday mornings, but we wanted to begin to have a positive impact on the generation that was coming up. They prayerfully considered, began to look at, discuss, talk about, hey, what model of school do we want to utilize? There's several models out there. I graduated from the ACE, Accelerated Christian Education, where we did PACES. My son graduated on switched on Schoolhouse, and there's a Beck, and all these different curriculums that are out there. And there's more today than probably there's ever been. So they began to prayerfully consider, what is the best curriculum to create kingdom-minded individuals? Researched, looked at, understanding that having a knowledge of the eternal, not just simply thinking about those things that are day to day. Like I said, began to look at, consider what type of curriculum they wanted to use. Finally, they came to the decision that they were going to use accelerated classical Christian education based on the trivium, or reading, writing, and arithmetic, utilizing things like the omnibus, going through and talking about rhetoric, and just the different aspects of classical Christian education. It was such just an ideal method of education. I got to be honest with you, its fair share of challenges, absolutely. Is it a very challenging curriculum? Yes. Is it meant for everybody? Probably not. Is there a lot of free time for many of our upper grades? No, it is absolutely a very stretching, very challenging curriculum. But I can tell you this, it does put out some of the best students that I've ever seen. So anyway, Dad, 12 years ago, got a couple of our church members together, began to speak with Mr. Hendrickson about being the headmaster. Mr. Hendrickson accepted, I'll say, the challenge. And goodness sake, for, like I said, the past 12 years, we have been literally educating hundreds of children. We've seen a few graduating classes, and I'm going to share more about that in a moment. And goodness, some of the testimonies we've seen, we've sent children from our school to Washington, D.C. to participate in the National Spelling Bee, beating out all the other schools, not public and private schools here in Fayetteville. Sent them up there a couple of times. One of our students a few years ago was sent out to Texas for the Bible Bee, winning a $25,000 scholarship. All of these things are just kind of like accolades for our school and the type of education that we're cultivating during this time. I have had the opportunity and honor of judging the past couple of years the speech meets that our children have done, and everywhere from I want to say kindergarten, first grade, all the way through to 12th grade. Our children are giving different types of speeches, whether the younger grades are giving fables that they're having to memorize, working forward to the middle grades doing, goodness sake, the Gettysburg Address, or a speech from Eisenhower, or whoever. Just powerful speeches throughout history. Ronald Reagan's speech when the shuttle crashed. Are now touching the face of God speech. Just powerful, powerful speeches. And then as they grow up and they get older, they actually begin to do their own speeches, where they write a speech and deliver it about something that they are passionate about. And so just having the opportunity to watch them from so young to so old, and our older classes getting up there and speaking deliberately and with passion about things that they care about, and realizing at that time, right, guys, that as these individuals are giving these speeches and they're talking, that many of them, having been with us for years, seeing what my dad desired all those years ago coming to fruition. What do I mean by that? Well, seeing these children who have been in our school for a number of years beginning to be those upperclassmen, right? And as they decide what they're going to give their speech on, as they decide what they're going to write about, realizing as they pick their topics, deliver their speeches, that we have indeed had a great deal of success when it comes to building a kingdom mindset, raising up children with a biblical worldview. It is so incredibly powerful. Like I said before, though, it has had its fair share of challenges. I remember several years ago, goodness, probably 5 years, maybe 6 years ago now, we got the call that I sit on the board of directors, but no school board, no headmaster, no teacher ever wants to get. We had sent a class to go visit the battleship North Carolina in Wilmington. And on their way over there, it was raining. Our 15-passenger van hydroplaned and ended up crashed, right? The call we get, all the children are on the way to the hospital. And I mean, literally, guys, we had probably 12 or 15 kids, my daughter being among them, who's in the van. And I believe it was Bladenboro or something like that was the hospital they were on their way to, 45-minute drive. Immediately, I get in the car, a feeling such remorse for all of these children having been in this accident. And then, the receptionist at RCCA having to give the parents the phone call that your kid has been in an accident on this school trip on their way to see the battleship. And I remember, like I said, my daughter was one of the ones, and I was the first one on the scene, at the hospital, that is. And, running in and checking on our kids and being sure that everybody, and praise God, everybody was okay. We had a couple of, children who sustained whiplash and things like that. But what a challenging moment. You're like, you realize, right, how precious life is, and how precious it is that these parents are giving us the honor of doing these things, putting their children's lives in our hands, and how precious that honor is and how important it is. Here we go. I mean, praise God that nothing lasting was sustained by these children. And as it happens, all of them stayed in the school. The parents were not upset. They understood the accident of the situation. But again, that moment just had such a profound, because it made me come to the realization, guys, that these individuals, these parents, we are truly partnering with them in raising their children, again, with this biblical worldview. And what an honor that is, that we have the opportunity to come alongside with the parents and instruct their children in a godly manner, in a godly fashion. Now, don't get me wrong, we teach high levels of mathematics. I was just talking with my little brother, who does a very similar online program as what we teach at the school, and he's going to be a senior, or is a senior, I guess, now, because he just completed, and this year he was doing calculus. And so it's like, wow, the depth of whether, again, you're talking chemistry or biology or, the mathematics, language at such a young level. We teach Latin throughout the grades, and then the upper grades have the opportunity to also learn Hebrew, Greek. And so just what a just a powerful, powerful thing that takes place there. I want to share just one or two other things real quick, and that is, how impressed I was. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to do the high school graduation. Ashley Brunson, as the valedictorian, has been in our school for 4 or 5 years now. The entire Brunson family has impacted me. I love each member of their family, and as I watch them grow and watch them excel, Ashley being, a very most excellent student, and with weepy eyes, as she's given her valedictorian speech yesterday, remembering the times that she has shared in the school, whether it's playing Foursquare here in the log building, Mr. Ballard's stories that he would tell, the instruction that Mr. Hendrickson would give, and literally just story upon story of her education experience here at Renaissance, and just the power and the impact. Literally, this young lady being brought to a point of tears because of the level of impact. And guys, I got to tell you, right, as an individual who has sacrificed for this school, I can remember back in the early days when I first came on and began being a part of the board. It was financially, right, it was challenging. We had to sacrifice at the church in order to keep the school open. There were times when I went without a paycheck, and the bill still had to be paid. The teachers still had to be paid. The lights still had to be kept on. Y'all know, Duke Energy, they don't run for free. That's just the way it is. And when you've got men and women working for you, they can't do that for free because they got their own families. And so it was one of those things where literally, guys, on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis, we were having to have faith and sacrifice in order to keep the school open. And as I'm watching Miss Brunson yesterday give her valedictorian speech and talk and discuss about the impact, or talk and discuss about the godly, biblical, kingdom worldview that she now has, I got to tell you, really, it makes it all so worthwhile. The sacrifice, the level of intention, the pouring out, the going, the doing, the struggle, the fight, right? To do all that you can do, and then to see the impact, the positive impact that it has on these students. On my way over, before doing this, I was actually in their award ceremony, and to hear each one of the teachers talk about each one of their students and the positive impact that these students have had upon the teachers, and to hear the impact from the parents of that the teachers had on the students, and to see each one in the awards and the level of excellence, and just all of these things transpire and take place. We had probably our biggest class attendance this year, somewhere in the 120, 130 range. And again, just the level of impact that these teachers have on the students students have on the teachers, and cultivating that good, again, Bible-based worldview in the place of education is just such a powerful thing. It kind of puts me in mind of the psalm that David wrote in Psalm 127, where David writes this. He says, "Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. Unless the Lord guards the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. In vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for he gives his beloved sleep. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. Happy is the man who has his quiver full. They shall not be ashamed, but shall speak with their enemies in the gates." And friends, I think as David writes this, I think this is just such a powerful thing, because we see here, unless the Lord builds the house, we know that we need the Lord to build every area, every aspect. And understand, I believe that as he writes this, we have to realize that he's not just talking about a physical house, but he's talking about the community of family. And unless the Lord is a part of that community of family, that building process of raising children and parents, mothers and daughters and fathers and sons and grandparents and aunts and uncles, unless the Lord is at the very heart and the center of that, then the one who's building it literally is doing what he's doing in vain. It's not going to come to any good fruition whatsoever. And the Lord blesses these individuals with rest and with sleep and fruitfulness. And then he goes in and he says, listen, blesses the man who, has a quiver full of children. They're going to be like arrows in his hand. And a few years ago, I did kind of a study on the bow, the arrow, all the way from, ancient Mesopotamia through the Dark Ages. And bow and arrows are still, archery is still, and I'll say it is still an art form today, because it's not just a sport, but literally it is an art. Every aspect of it. I remember the story of what I refer to in my French, La Bataille d'Agincourt, the Battle of Agincourt. And it was during the 100-Year War, right? The English were at odds with France once again in one of their many battles. But this one, it kind of was so very decisive, because this art form, this tool that had been taken from ancient times, was now being utilized in then what would be modern times, obviously not modern times for us today. And what really made the difference is the English had expanded the use of the bow and the arrow. They would get staves that were 6 feet long, made from hardwood, properly polished and utilized, and they would use different segments of the tree, the outer versus the core of the tree. And it's very similar. So I watched the show Forged in Fire, right? And they talk about how the cutting edge of the blade needs to be of hardened steel, but if you can get the back part of the steel of a mild steel, it gives it some bounce and it can be much, more effective and utilized. Well, the same thing applies to the bow. If you can get the two areas of both the harder core wood and the outer softer wood, and utilize these two types of wood when making a 6-foot long bow, it can be a much more effective weapon. And so even as these bows are being made, they're being made very intentionally. Every part about it is an art form. And the construction of the bow itself, and then even the utilizing of what they would use for the string, whether, goodness, they used everything from like intestines to silk, and understanding that string had to be well cared for, just like the wood of the bow had to be well cared for. It had to be polished, it had to be oiled, it could not be, left to sit out in the elements, because it would get brittle and then break, and the same thing for the string. And so every aspect of it was, again, just such a beautiful art form. And then we get into the art form of making the arrows. And understand, again, as a kid, right, we tried to make these bow and arrows and had these arrows that hardly even flew or went this way or that way. And I got to tell you, what an analogy, right? In today's society, we have children going this way and children going that way and up and down and all over the place, because the lost art of arrow making and child rearing, it has indeed become that in so many cases. It is a lost art form. And of course, we know the parts of the arrow. You have the business end, the broadhead, right? And that's the everything else is about getting that broadhead where it needs to go. And the parts of that, you have the broadhead, then you have the shaft, which is what kind of propels that broadhead in the direction that it needs to go in. You have the fletching, the feathers, which even in those days, right, the fletching had to be from the same goose in order so that the arrows, they had to be they have the same mold to them so that the arrows would fly straight. And then, of course, you have the knock, which is kind of like the backside, the business end of the back of the arrow, which is actually what you put on the string and causes the fletching and the shaft and the broadhead to be propelled to the place where it needs to go. And in the what I'll call the European theater, during these days, the English had literally rewritten warfare to the point that here they are at the La Bataille d'Agincourt, and they are outnumbered 2-1. It appears that it's an easy French victory. But then they unveiled, right, their secret weapon, the English longbowmen. The level of accuracy that these archers were able to display. But keep in mind, they were able, long story short is that the English won the Battle of Agincourt, even though they were sorely outnumbered. And the way that they won was because of the warriors and the tactics that they used to win that war. They applied the artistry of the English longbowmen, the artistry, the strategy of building bow and string and broadhead, shaft, fletching, knock, right? Every aspect of it. And because they took care in the way they built these bows, and because they took care in the way they built these arrows, they were literally the most effective military of the day. The ability to win at odds of 2-1, the enemy forces outnumber you by 2-1, and yet you won the victory because of your principles, your artistry, your ability to have or make war at a whole nother level. Now, let me apply this, and again, I won't keep you much longer. When we look at Renaissance Classical Christian Academy, I look at it as though we are building the warrior's arrows. We are applying the sharpness of the broadhead, the business end that is going to be shot into this very dark and desperate world. The shaft that kind of holds everything together, knowing that arrow shaft, it can't be bent to the left. It's got to be. So in order for the broadhead, the business end, to get where it needs to go, the shaft has got to be perfect. It's got to be precisely straight. Any misdirection, and it goes off course. It will not hit the mark. The fletching, which causes the arrow to actually fly in a straight direction. So the shaft, if it is curved in any way, as it is released from the bow, whatever that curve does is the place where that will go. But as the arrow takes flight, it's the fletching that causes that arrow to be propelled in the right direction. And then, of course, the knock is the propellant, that place where the string connects with the arrow, propelling it to the place. We are, at Renaissance, very intentional in the way that we build arrows. We build our broadheads to be sharp, our shafts to be precise and straight, our fletchings to navigate the wilds of this world in a precise and straight manner, and finally the knocks to propel with swiftness and strength, ferocity into our society. Because I can tell you, friends, in our society, we live in a very dark and challenging, difficult time. But I stand encouraged because I know here at Cliffdale, here at Renaissance, we are literally doing all that we can possibly do as warriors for the kingdom of God. We're doing all that we can possibly do to properly equip those arrows to go out into the world with a good biblical, godly kingdom worldview to accomplish everything that God would have for them to accomplish. Listen, if those individuals do what God has called them to do, then at the end of the day, right, we at Renaissance, at Cliffdale, will have been a success. And so that's, I think it's great stuff. Anyway, that's about all the time I have for today. Listen, keep in mind, if you would, like, share, and also subscribe. And if you have questions or stories, please email us, let us know. Share those stories, and you can know this. If you share those stories with me, I'll share them here also on the podcast. Thanks once again for being here with me. At A Goodman's Tale, go out there and live life.